Well, welcome to the Clean Tech Meetup on heavy and medium duty charging. I'm Thomas Hall, Executive Director of CleanStart. And when I find my mouse, I want to thank our sponsors, SMUD, River City Bank, Bloom, who's hosting us here, this is not Brandon Bloom, or Brandon, who owns Bloom. This is Josh Maddox, who runs Wherev. But you might see someone else come in who is the owner, and we always want to thank him for it. River City Bank, Blue Tech Valley, we're under the CEC Innovation Cluster with them, and the CMC, that's the California Mobility Center. You're going to hear more about them tonight, so I won't try to steal any thunder on that. I also want to thank those of you out there who support us. Some of you bought tickets for tonight and have done that at our events. Some of you are regular subscribers to our PayPal, and that really helps us. It validates what we're doing, and it lets us know that we're going in the right direction.
So if anybody has the urge to make a donation or buy tickets or books of tickets,
should I get my wallet out now?
Please feel free. You've been very good, Roger. You've gotten your wallet out several times. But yeah.
So we're not going to listen to all of these here, but we have a lot of our discussions on YouTube, past discussions, past Clean Tech meetups. Everything from charging to recycling, you name it, it's up there. A lot of great discussions. There'll be some of this discussion from tonight up there. So make sure you go and check it out and subscribe. And tonight we're revisiting, so I had slides on a charging meetup that we did earlier this year. And I'm like, I don't have to change a whole lot. I just have to say charging, but bigger. Because as we know, heavy duty vehicles, medium duty vehicles are a lot bigger. They take a lot more energy to move, which means that we have to figure out ways to get a whole lot more energy in them in an efficient manner so that they are, that they deliver on the promise of being better. Because that's one of the things. The energy transition isn't just cleaner, isn't just more equitable, but it's also supposed to have better products. So just some quick highlights that I grabbed from California. I know there's more of them here. By 2035, transitioning 100% of new sales of passenger vehicles and trucks to ZEVs, dry edge trucks and off-road vehicles and equipment to zero emissions everywhere where feasible, 100% of medium and heavy duty trucks by 2045. And the state's putting a lot of money behind that. This is a number that I had from a couple months ago. So as you know, some things change, but $2.95 billion in investment plan update for clean transportation. I also want to highlight some of the places that you can go and look for information on the funding for this. A good one that I think CalStart did Cal EVP, right?
No.
Okay.
We do the other programs.
The other programs. So, but Cal EVP, if you're looking at EV infrastructure, they're rolling out their second iteration of that now. SMUD, they have portals for residential and business charging. The funding wizard at the Air Resources Board, there's stuff there. It's a little tough to use. And there's also open grants. For those of you that know Sidell, who's come out here, a local entrepreneur building a platform to connect people with better grants. Those are some places that you can find some more funding. And with that, I'd like to introduce our two guests for tonight. Tim Taylor, Vice President and Co-Director of Sacramento Clean Cities Coalition, and Orville Thomas. I want to make another joke about being unemployed, but no, the CEO and President of the CMC, which we've been at before, and we're excited to have it start going. So I'm going to have Tim Taylor start off by doing his presentation. So give me 1 second while it takes over.
on our YouTube channel, there's also a discussion, just me and Thomas arguing with each other on heavy duty charging. So if you want to see more information on that.
Who ends up winning the debate?
Pardon?
Who ends up winning the debate?
I win them all. I win them. It's part of the deal.
Remember who's going to edit the film.
Oh, there you go.
Right.
Always in their favor.
Doesn't matter about the arguments. The film editor that's going to win.
But one of the purposes of doing that is if you watch it and you have other questions or you disagree with it, we're trying to make it an interactive forum. So if you find anything in there you want to learn more about or you want to disagree with me, we won't film that part, but please comment.
I'm trying to get these other things off the screen here. So there it is. I got it. It showed up. Took a while to come around.
Okay.
Let me get these other things. Well, okay, I can look there, I guess. Whatever. Yeah.
There we go. And now,
Escape. There we go. That's it. I'll just do down arrows from here on out.
yeah, there you go. Where'd it go? All right. There, that did not, that was, there we go. All right, now you got it. Tim Taylor, everybody.
So I should give a little bit of background. Sacramento Clean Cities Coalition is one of 75 coalitions around the United States under the umbrella of the Federal Department of Energy. We're not federal employees, and the various coalitions are constituted in various different ways. Some of them are under state departments of transportation. Some of them are under state energy departments. The one in California, there happen to be 12, with one that has teetered on the edge of 13th down Antelope Valley. And some of those are in metropolitan planning organizations like SACOG in our area. Some of them are under environmental management departments. The one in San Francisco, for example, is the City and County of San Francisco Environmental Management. Ours happens to be a nonprofit 501c3. So we do a lot of work with implementation of zero emission vehicles, especially medium and heavy duty vehicles, and also transportation strategies in what have traditionally been called disadvantaged communities. This would be, whether that's the right term to use in the future is a little bit problematic right now, but it might be traditionally underserved communities. My goal tonight was to talk about what I thought there were sort of the employment and entrepreneurial opportunities in the heavy duty zero emission vehicle field. I don't have a lot of time to talk about these things, so I'll go relatively quickly. I organized them into several different categories, and in each category I'll say a few things. Having heard what people around the table said, I don't know that a lot of what I say will be particularly useful to everybody, but we'll give it a try. So power management, grid insufficient. So at the sites where heavy-duty vehicles are going to be located, there will be a need for enormous amounts of power. The city of Fairfield, for example, has about 500 vehicles in their fleet. They need the amount of power that the city of Chico uses in order to completely electrify their fleet operations. So that's just an enormous amount of power. And you can't, this theme will come up more times in this particular presentation and around other presentations in the future. But there's a lot of talk about load management, a lot of talk about battery storage, a lot of talk about how you try to deal with the load that's going to be put on at different times and smoothing out the peaks. There comes a time when you just need electrons. You can't just get all the power you need at off-peak times in order to be able to load it all in the vehicles at peak times. Sooner or later, you need electrons. So at the site, you're going to have to do all the things that are traditional, and as you phase into more and more and more vehicles at the site, you're going to have to do the load management strategies, and there's a lot of software opportunities for developing jobs, that is, software jobs, to develop load management strategies. I was talking today with a company that does major depots, charging depots for fleets. And they have strategies where the fleet can have a charging depot, and immediately adjacent can be a public access charging site, and they have software that allows them to manage the entire site, both the site that's the fleet site where all the money's going to the fleet, or being all the energy and the finances are at the fleet side, and the public access side. And that's some pretty sophisticated software. Charging as a service, there's a growing number of companies that are doing that kind of work. I don't know if you folks are familiar with it, but that's where somebody will come in and say, I will do everything. Some people will just do the power and the infrastructure. Some people will do power, infrastructure, all the management of it, and finance the vehicles. And that's basically if you guarantee to buy X number of kilowatts from me at this price, I will finance everything, or I will finance this part of it, you finance the rest. So charging as a service is a huge industry that's just skyrocketing right now, because the amount of, the cost of the electric vehicles, the cost of all the systems that need to be put in place, cost of electric charging at scale, when you're actually doing large numbers of chargers, is just huge. And the fleet operators, especially public agency fleet operators, don't have the capacity to come up with the amount of money that they need. Bidirectional charging, that's another software place, and hardware too. I can't begin to say that I'm any kind of expert in these things, but we're working with General Motors and SMUD on a project, a bidirectional charging project that they're doing, and listening to Deepak at SMUD talk about what SMUD has to try to do to figure out how to deal instantaneously with power that's going both directions is just, it's just mind-boggling. And there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done on their side as well as on the side of the people that are actually doing the bidirectional charging systems that are the chargers themselves. Obviously, things like charging installation planning. People need to do all this site management and all the entire process of figuring out what needs to happen at a given site. And that's not just for the charging of the vehicles, that's for all the modifications you have to do to the actual facility. If you have a transit bus with a 800 volt, 600 kilowatt hour battery pack, OSHA regulations says you can't have anything that's any metal within 8 feet of that thing. That means, and if you want to put it up on a lift, that means the roof of your maintenance facility is too low because it has steel struts. If you have steel in the concrete in the pad of your maintenance facility, that's a potential hazard. So you might have to have an enormous amount of work done to the facility. So engineering work at facilities, all the work that has to be done to try to make that facility ready to work on a heavy-duty battery electric vehicle is very significant. And that doesn't even count what you're doing out in the site, because if you're moving heavy-duty battery electric vehicles around, some of those have to have drive-through chargers. They can't drive, especially if you have public works trucks with trailers. You've seen it all, a 2 or 3 axle dump truck with a trailer behind it that has a backhoe on it. That's a classic public works combination. They can't front into a space where the charger's at the front and then back out again. They have to drive through a space. Every drive-through space has to have bollards and concrete curbs to protect the charger itself. And you have to have very wide, obviously much wider turning radii than you would for private cars. So the site itself is going to require an enormous amount of work, and that's all engineering and architectural work that somebody's got to do. Power management, grid insufficiency, again, I went through all this stuff already, I think, but just to talk about the amount of energy that it's going to take at a place like Fairfield, 500 vehicles. Sacramento County, 4,000 vehicles. Caltrans, 17,000. Not all in one place, obviously, but the amount of energy that we need to be able to come up with, this is an important thing for microgrids. Start thinking about, where's all this energy going to come from? I don't know exactly what the situation at SMUD is. They say that they'll be carbon neutral by 2030. And if they're thinking that they're going to be carbon neutral by 2030 and have enough energy to supply all the power to all the corporation yards of all the heavy-duty truck facilities as well as all the light-duty vehicles by 2030, who knows? What I can say is that we had a presentation by a postdoc from UC Davis ITS last month, and she got all the data from all the IOUs around California, and compared what they will have in place by 2035 for feeder lines with the light-duty implementation requirements. And what she determined is that by 2035, 75% of the feeder lines would be essentially overwhelmed. Of course, she didn't take into consideration the fact that the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation for heavy-duty vehicles starts January 1st, 2024, and the Air Resources Board is currently working on a similar rule for off-road vehicles So there's an enormous amount more power than she was taking into consideration. So there's no way that the grid by itself is going to be able to supply the energy necessary. We will have to develop microgrids. Microgrids will have to be resilient and sustainable, and that means whatever on-site power you can produce renewably, and battery storage, so that you manage the load from the grid and you manage the energy that's being produced on the site. But there will also have to be robust on-site power generation. Photovoltaic panels, they're kind of romantic, but they don't produce much energy in the overall scheme of things. You need real serious power production on site. The company the depot company depot installation company I was talking to today is doing a depot down in Oakland right now, and the PG&E can't get the amount of power to that site by the time they're going to open up. So part of their regular strategy is to put on-site generation. And it's NextEra. Yeah. And their strategy is to have and several of them. We're looking at microgrids for transportation hubs, which is a much smaller scale thing. This is community-based transportation for lower income communities. We're seeing that you have to figure out a way for them to do exactly the same thing. They need to have power. They need resilience. If you're providing transportation to people, you can't just have the power go out for 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours. And the longer that power is going to be out, the bigger you're thinking that battery is going to be. But ultimately, you have to have the electrons. Sooner or later, you have to have the electrons. We're hoping to be able to have a couple of these smaller microgrid systems in place at a few of the transportation hubs we're putting in place in Sacramento over the next 2 years as pilots, really. But microgrids are something that is I think a huge opportunity in terms of jobs and everything associated with it, from the planning to the engineering to the technologies. It's a huge opportunity. And the lower the emissions of your on-site power generation, the better. Obviously, if you can do it with zero emissions, that's the best. Interestingly enough, along those lines, Cummins has I don't know if you guys people in this room probably don't follow very much about internal combustion engines, but Cummins, the largest diesel engine manufacturer in the world, has developed what they call a fuel agnostic engine, which can basically run on the basic block can run on any fuel. You modify the head for the fuel injection process, and you modify the combustion, the amount of the amount of combustion in the chamber based on the fuel. But their hydrogen combustion engine, 15-liter hydrogen combustion engine, running as a genset at a steady state, has NOx emissions that are so low that they're below 0.004 grams of NOx per brake horsepower hour. The way the certification process works, if you're below 5 at the third decimal point, well, if you're below 5 at any point, you round down. But if you're out to the third decimal point and you're below 5, you round down. That means it's certified as a zero NOx emission engine. So that engine could theoretically be a combustion engine at a site and have a certified emission of zero NOx. If you're running it on hydrogen, zero carbon. So that's another strategy for on-site power generation. Okay, so all the things that you're probably all familiar with: heavy-duty ZEV and near ZEV technologies. Those are the kinds of things that are going to show up first. Trucks up through class 5 and 6, and the lowest end of 7, which is just up over 33,000 pounds. But sort of the thing you would look at as the biggest thing that would drive around your neighborhood delivering furniture or appliances, that size thing, and smaller are the things that will show up, plus transit buses and shuttle buses and things. And there's a whole world of job opportunities in the drivetrain world there. I think depending on how sophisticated you are, obviously developing the drivetrains and making them more efficient, but doing the technical work, training the people to work on them, and doing the work on them as they have any kind of mechanical or drivetrain issues is an area that's just huge. We have to find ways to train the technicians, and it's an entirely different training process. The tools that you have to have are different. You have to have you have to have OSHA certified gloves. They have to be inspected every time you use them, and you have to replace them quite regularly. There are all kinds of issues associated with just maintaining battery electric vehicles, especially, and as you get into the bigger vehicles, you have these very high voltage systems with huge amounts of kilowatt hour power that could very easily not just kill you, just sort of vaporize you. You would do something wrong and you disappear in a puff of pink smoke. So that's the whole area of technicians, everything related to the training of the technicians, the helping people figure out how to most effectively get technicians trained, being a technician for that matter yourself. And then it's not just the vehicles, you have chargers. You probably have seen the statistic, something like 22% of all the DC fast chargers in the United States are not working at any given time. That whole issue of charger maintenance is a huge issue, and something that that's another whole work area, I think. A business of doing just charger maintenance is something that could be out there, but also helping to build more robust chargers that don't need as much maintenance would be another one. That diagram there is a diagram of the Oakland depot that NextAir is building. But you have, for fleets and for dealerships and for depot service, regulatory compliance, huge. All right, there's a new regulation the Air Resources Board just passed. Fleets that we have been working with think that they are actually going to need to hire, any fleet of any size is going to actually have to hire another staff person just to manage the compliance issues associated with the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation and that regulation and how it affects fleets, because you at least in the first few years, the trucks that you are mandated to get basically don't exist, especially if you're a public agency that has vocational work trucks. You just can't get trucks that do the job. And the people that do the specification work for those vehicles, spec writers working for fleet operators, that's a whole additional work category that's out there that people who understand zero emission vehicles and how they're configured, and also understand vehicle technology and what you need to do, can be the specification writers, so that agencies can go out to bid and actually purchase vehicles that can do the job, or at least write the specs for vehicles that can do the job. Funding, facility design, I talked about those various things. And then all the you were talking earlier, Thomas, about credit management and how you figure out how you monetize the credits. That's a whole well, Thomas is in that industry, and that's a whole industry that's just very significant. As long as we have credits, people have to figure out how to monetize them. At the OEMs, you've got drivetrain and battery upgrades. You've got all the integration of how you integrate zero emission equipment into vehicles. Hydrogen is going to be a very big deal. It's the bigger the vehicle, the more likely it is that you're going to need the amount of energy on board that hydrogen can supply. There's who knows how many, solid state batteries may or may not solve that, but sooner or later, like I said, you need the electrons, and you also need the time for the, in heavy duty vehicles, time is money. And anything that takes more time than is currently being invested in something is something that costs the operator more money than they would otherwise be paying. So everything you can do to reduce anything associated with the time associated with charging is a strategy in a business. On this thing, the third diagram, or little truck diagram over, which has the hybrid, it should have an X on it, because there really isn't any. I mean, in theory, you could have hybrid trucks, but nobody's going to build them, so it's probably not a viable thing to have on this slide. And then, of course, nuclear energy sooner or later. I don't know if anybody in here is into nuclear energy, but that's obviously a way that you get a lot of energy for zero carbon if you don't have a lot of political opposition. So that's it for me. That's who I am. That's how you can reach me.
All right. We're going to step right up and have Orville come and talk a little bit about the CMC, and then we'll have a discussion with the both of them. Let's see. There it is, second one.
Yeah, thanks. Perfect. So this is a slide deck that we've started to make and to share out with partners at like the Department of Energy or other entities that have big funding cycles. The CMC right now is a ramp-up facility located off of Florin Perkins and Fruit Ridge. But what we're hoping to build is a zero-emission innovation hub. I have stopped saying like zero-emission vehicle innovation hub because I think it's much larger than that. And I think we were going to rebrand it because I've talked to some of you in the room. What we are thinking through for probably version 2.0 is how do we partner with SMUD, with Sacramento State, with our community of entrepreneurs, and create a innovation campus that focuses on clean energy. And so that could be fuel cells, hydrogen, it could be microgrids, batteries, solid state, or just batteries that are different chemistries rather than lithium ion, or it could be clean power. How do we work with SMUD on kind of power engineering, making the grid sustainable, making it so it could handle the influx of what's going to happen with Advanced Clean Cars 2 and Advanced Clean Fleets? And then how do we focus on zero emission innovation in general? Because I think when we say vehicles, it really does just lead you down a path where you think cars and trucks. But we want to reduce some of the VMT that's going to be out there. And so that is going to be on microtransit, that's going to be on automated vehicles that are going to be zero emission, that's going to be on electric assist cargo, electric assist bicycles, tricycles, all of these things. And I think that is what our next iteration plan is going to be for the Innovation Hub. So this is a rendering of what it's going to look like. That is a site that the California State University system owns and has already gotten permitted and environmentally cleared to build a innovation hub on. It is off of Ramona Road, so by Power Inn Road, just south of Folsom. And it has really good access points to campus. There is campus housing that's already being built on the northern end of Ramona Road. And so when we look at this, and this is the one that they gave me, we are also thinking for $500 million, you could build this. That is a $350 million building right there, inclusive of about $100 million worth of new technology that will help entrepreneurs or researchers thinking through the next kind of iteration of clean energy and clean tech. And then we would add a new school of engineering to Sacramento State. Their current engineering school has been in its same facility since the 1960s. You could probably talk about the current state of it. And it's surprising because so many bright minds in the utility space all throughout the state have come from Sac State. And so how can we kind of use this moment to enhance the campus and kind of create a better ecosystem for entrepreneurs or students that are looking to get involved in this type of engineering for zero emission and clean energy. And then also Sac State is thinking through an opportunity that they might have to do a PhD program in engineering around power engineering. So that engineering school that is not shown right now, because I think we're just starting those conversations with new leadership at the school, would be about $150 million. And then add to that, there is opportunity, since it's by a transit corridor and by student housing already, to put some more housing on it. So I think we have real opportunities in this area to create something. And I think on this left side, you kind of see why we're doing all of this stuff. Really, it's a chance. It's a chance for our local region to kind of amplify and accelerate what we already see starting. We see a lot of startups coming from the Bay Area here, locating. We see a lot of venture capital coming to the area or starting to get really set up to the scale to amplify what our entrepreneurs are doing. And then we really want this opportunity to, as Tim has talked about, create a new workforce in the area, kind of diversify the jobs that currently are largely government or healthcare. They're great jobs, but these are opportunities to get involved in the clean tech economy. And I think we see as the state goes with mandates, as the state goes with kind of businesses that are setting up, we need to create those workers that can come in and help us get to where the state's goals need to be. And so this is just kind of a quick slide about where the mobility industry is for California. Up until I think 2 years ago is when we got this data. The #1 export was electric vehicles, largely because of Tesla and some of the other companies. Consumer spending, 120 billion on electric vehicles. And then, some of the data on the right side is talking about, the percentages of the EV industry. It was great. I was just earlier this year at the unveiling of Tesla's engineering headquarters coming back to the state. And so I think as we see some of these companies that have gone outside of the state looking to come back in because of the capital that California's government is setting up. I think Thomas talked about it. The governor 3 years ago said that there is an ambitious 6-year plan for $10 billion of investments in clean transportation. Just this past year, my last bill that I worked on at CleanStart was to reauthorize the Clean Transportation Program. That's the one at the Energy Commission that has about $110 million a year for infrastructure and grants. We reauthorized that now to 2035. There is a floor of spending for hydrogen for the first 4 years that will be about 15 million each year. So there is a lot of funding to come out for new infrastructure and different programs. So this is why we think, why I'm so bullish on what is now called the Mobility Center setting up shop in Sacramento, because we have kind of this moment where the regulators are pushing the industry, where there is funding coming from government in California, and then at the federal government finally having a partner with the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. California just got $1.2 billion for the hydrogen hub and Arches, which was our application. So we kind of think that this is a great opportunity for the school to really take the lead on building an innovation hub. And this is why we're kind of doing it. The model, a couple of other cities like Austin with, semiconductors, and New York and the State University of New York doing biotech. It has been proven that if we could partner with the university, and Jeff could talk about it too with PEM, coming out of the university system in Germany, it really has that natural feeder of faculty and students to be able to take their ideas to innovation and to iteration and kind of create a physical prototype. And then obviously PEM Motion and all the stuff that they've been able to do in Aachen, implementing our vision and our goal, some of the stuff that we've seen through PEM, through their campuses in Canada and Germany and Mexico, of what really comes out of the ecosystem. So if we build it, it kind of is that field of dreams theory of the industry will come and follow and set up around it. We're starting to see those really happen early. Bosch just bought into Roseville. They're going to spend about $2 billion for semiconductors. We're seeing some battery startups with LeCap and Sparks putting themselves in Rancho Cordova and Folsom. And then we see, just up and down the road, places like Redwood or Tesla that are really investing in mega campuses on batteries or just manufacturing and gigafactories. And so our takeaways, really does help get to our climate goals, why we're doing this. It creates an opportunity to build a workforce in Sacramento that can move everywhere. And it creates an opportunity then for companies to come to Sacramento knowing that there are workforces here already in play. And then it complements our ecosystem and allows Sacramento and the greater Sacramento region to kind of set up a hub and spoke type model where they know that there is going to be support in the innovation center and do small scale manufacturing, research development, prototyping, and testing at our facility. So that's really why I'm excited, and that's why I left CleanStart in a very nice job of pushing regulators and government officials and elected officials out there to take over as the CEO. When we talk about the charging for medium heavy duty, so my background is I worked at Lion Electric, and so they produced electric school buses and trucks from Class 5 all the way to Class 8. Class 8s are all in development right now. And I have just been leading over the last probably 8 months a energization and interconnection roundtable with CleanStart, where we'd get about 60 groups together, ranging from charging as a service partners like Forum Mobility, Watt EV, NextEra, large-scale fleet chargers like Tesla, Walmart, and others, and then the utilities, all in a room together around tables just like this. And we sit for the whole day and identify the barriers to entry, what are solutions, and then what should we be doing either at the CPUC level, at the legislative level, or at the executive office level for executive actions to accelerate the timeline for energization and interconnection. And the answers are, or the problems are robust. It stretches from, I think, 3 different types of capital: human capital, capital to fund the build out of the substations and switchgear, and then the kind of capital for kind of cities and others to invest in these kind of problems. And what we have been seeing, Tim touched on a lot of it, is it might be the Wild West for the next couple of years. We have started to hear companies like Watt EV that are going to put a massive charging as a service station out by the airport just decided they can't wait. They can't wait on the supply chain and the utilities. And this is waiting with a utility partner like SMUD that's so far ahead of like PG&E. They can't wait. So what they did was they bought their own substation, and they worked with SMUD to say, if we buy it, can you power it up? And so I think that's what we are going to start seeing is upstream investment by a lot of these charging as a service companies, because they have CapEx that are in the billions or hundreds of millions of dollars that allow them to go and beat the utilities to all this equipment. The publicly traded investor-owned utilities, they are behind the ball with the regulations on the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, for those that don't know the acronym, and sorry for speaking in acronym soup. But they can't get the approval to do ratepayer increases fast enough to build out to the future. And so what we've tried to do in the legislature is give them permission with pre-build as the concept to forecast what they will need to build on the routes that are most commercially used to build for those medium heavy duty. And the vehicle side, we're pretty much there. Like, we have a Tesla Semi that can go 500 miles with a full load and charge in 3 hours. So as Tim said, downtime is money. In this sense, you're pushing your whole thing. They're doing a whole day of driving and being able to charge overnight and come back out. On the hydrogen side, the Nikola Tre 8 fuel cell EV Class 8 truck can also do about 500 miles full load, and refuel probably in less than an hour with their hydrogen fuel. So we can kind of see where the technology is, and as you get down in classes and weights, you kind of see that the technology is more readily available. But it's the infrastructure that's going to hold everybody up. And the infrastructure isn't going to be able to work until the utilities get the data from the fleets. And then with that data, they're able to build out, moving forward. So what we've tried to do is twofold. One, help the utilities plan ahead to the extent that they can and buy as much as they can, or create uniformity amongst all the utilities in California so the gear can be used, whether it is San Diego or Riverside for Southern California Edison, or the Central Valley with PG&E, or Sacramento with SMUD. And then the second thing we're trying to do is an education campaign that's an all-out campaign to the fleets and owner-operators so that they can pass their information along to utilities. And that's the information of, what is your duty cycle? How many miles are you driving? Where are you driving? What's your downtime? And that helps them, I think, figure out how to save money, because they don't necessarily all need to have a DC fast charger. A lot of them can get by with level 2 chargers and just stack kind of their drivers appropriately. But then it also lets that data go to the utilities so that they can make the case with the Public Utility Commission on being able to charge enough for expansion. Someone brought up a really good question the last time we had this working group was, are utilities the right people to take this on? Are we expecting them to do everything the same way, like, right, they handled everyone getting a microwave, they handled everyone getting an air conditioner, they handled all of these things in the past? Is it the right thing to expect utilities to also take on energization of transportation? And that's a question that is in everyone's mind right now. The second part of that question is, if the answer is yes, why aren't we starting to have a conversation where we just tell people that the rates are going to go up, but what can you expect from rates going up? It is a false narrative and probably a false promise to assume that we can do all of this stuff to the level that we need, as Tim has pointed out, without rates going up. And it is an equity issue, 100%, but it is also a issue of we need to get to this point and we have to pay for it. PG&E just applied for an $8 billion loan from the Department of Energy. We're keeping an eye on that to see how they approve it, or if they don't approve it, or how much did they approve. But ratepayers are going to have to foot the bill. But what are we giving them? And I think we could do a better job of talking about that into the future of, medium heavy duty charging. I'm really excited about question and answers more than anything. I could talk about this, but I think question and answers are going to be better.
Let's get into the question and answer period. I'm going to bring back up the thing here and invite Gary to come up here.
Round of applause.
Yeah, round of applause.
So, pretty intriguing stuff from both of you. Let me start with Oracle. $500 million for this facility at Sac State.
Yeah.
Circle any sources for that?
Yeah, we have a lot of sources for that. So I was just on call. I'm doing meetings every day this week, even before I start on Monday, in the official capacity, with the governor's office, with the governor's office of business development and Dee Dee Myers, who runs that, with the Department of Energy at the federal level, with the California Energy Commission. There are so many different pots that you can pick from, and they have different amounts that could come out there, right? The Clean Transportation Program at the Energy Commission is not going to give us $500 million. I wish they can, but they can't. But they could give us, tens and 20s to buy that technology that we're going to use inside of the innovation hub. If the governor's office said, we can give you $200 million in the next budget, and we had legislative approval for that, that gets us a huge ways forward, potentially with partnerships from the Department of Energy and their loan program office. We have started circulating legislative language to put $100 to $200 million in a potential climate bond that would go to voters next year. It's great that we have, Senator Ashby taking the lead on that and circulating that with the two legislators in the Assembly and Senate that are kind of putting the list up together. And so we think that there is opportunity to cobble it together. $500 million is a lot of money. I think when I break it down to say, can I find $350 million for the innovation hub, then we could think through $150 million for a kind of school property and engineering school. And that's easier to ask alumni than to go back into and say, is there an alumni that could be a private donor? Is there something that we could use with like a potential CSU bond? Or is there just opportunity now with the new president at Sac State, Luke Wood, coming in to say, hey, I get one ask, right? Or one or two big asks. How can we use this as a chance to facilitate greater growth? What I've started to kind of democratize with others is a model where the CMC in Sacramento is a hub and spoke for all of California's higher institutions. Why can't this be the gigantic lab that, San Diego State can work a little bit on lithium-ion batteries and technology, and then come up here and do that next stage of prototyping, research development, testing, and then sell those ideas? Why can't Long Beach do port decarbonization with hydrogen? Why can't Cal Poly Humboldt do offshore wind farming? I know UC Merced is doing fuel cell technologies. And so in that sense, if we can get other schools on board with it, of saying it amplifies and helps accelerate what we're already doing on campus for them to build a 200,000 square foot facility in Sacramento, close to regulators, close to the seat of government, with access to venture capital and companies all in the Bay Area to like show off our products to, we think it kind of makes a better idea than just saying Sac State wants to build a $200, $350 million center.
That immediately gets you to the question of who is competing for a hub.
Yeah.
Because there must be a whole group in LA.
Well, LA has Lacey, right? Luckily, LA's already done it with Lacey. I think we're a little bit different in that this is closely associated probably with Sac State and UC Davis immediately, whereas Lacey doesn't have that kind of tie-in with UCLA or USC. So, we applied for a tech hub. No one in California got it. We had a very strong application that had letters of support from Tesla, Rivian, Lion, Bosch, Siemens, Volectra saying, if you build it, we have a use for it. But I think, going into 2024, an election cycle, and not surprising that a lot of the funding went to states like Pennsylvania and Ohio and the Midwest, that might be a little more politically viable for investments in the next year than California is.
And the other thing and Thomas and I talked about this on our discussion back and forth, the huge war that's going to be created over ratepayers and who pays for all the expansion. Tim, you painted a fairly complete picture of it's a lot of money. I didn't even begin to. I'll give you credit for it anyway. But the opening bid from the consumer advocates in the state will be, well, let the trucks pay for it. Doesn't work because you have to do it in advance. On the other hand, utility economics are such that if you could say, look, we'll spread it and repay it over 50 years, it becomes a more manageable problem. And moreover, if part of the repayment of the loan is actually a dividend back to small ratepayers eventually to lower their rates, that's a more powerful argument. Is anybody thinking in terms of, put yourself in the shoes of the utility advocate or the consumer advocates in front of the PUC and the legislature? What are they going to say, and how do you get them on side?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when you talk about consumer advocates, the starting line for them is zero ratepayer increases, right? When you talk to the utilities, it is through that prism, how do we stretch as much as we can with the guarantee that if we spread it out over decades, as you said, it really doesn't put a crunch back downward on those that can't pay the most. We barely touched on some of the things that are opportune financing schemes, like the low carbon fuel standard and how do we grow that program. For those that aren't aware, it's an opportunity that the Air Resources Board gives for those that are reducing carbon intensity fuels. And it is now going through, I think, an iteration of a change in rulemaking where there is opportunity as we kind of scale up to a 30% reduction in carbon intensity by 2030 as the goal. How do we get credits to go back towards $200 and not where it is kind of a 60 to 80? And so we've talked about how can we allow those that do fast charging infrastructure to be more involved with that, given where the state's going, given the regulations, and kind of what we need to do. So that, I think, is where you're going to see the charging as a service, trucks as a service models come out in political power and push a little bit more with the utilities to say, hey, we can't get this done. Like, it's an ambitious goal, but right now it's just going to be a goal. And also, don't be surprised to see a lot of movement because of litigation. CARB has been famous for never losing a court case on their regulations, and the American Truck Association has now brought a case forward with the California Trucking Association against the Advanced Clean Fleets, and their cause or their kind of justification for reducing the regulation is all on infrastructure, is that we can't ask them to transition over if they don't have infrastructure to power it.
I've got a kind of quick question that also touches on what Tim had talked about. We had a discussion earlier on microgrids, and one of the things is that you have a microgrid that can also provide resilience to the overall grid and additional services within the grid. And one thing that that I think the presenters at that night struggled to try to potentially articulate is for your average ratepayer, the one that is a consumer advocate. When you think of a microgrid, a lot of times it's a company being able to make decisions of what time and how they manage their power. But if you're now talking about your average consumer, your average ratepayer, what does the microgrid really mean to them, and how would you kind of, articulate the benefit in the energy transition of charging and everything of a microgrid and your, I guess, your residential or small commercial ratepayer.
For me, the idea of the microgrid was more was more immediately preventing the inability for people to move goods and services and themselves, and putting enough power back into an immediately adjacent kind of facility so you have a place for people if there's an emergency to go for heating, cooling, food, that sort of thing, safety. It was fascinating to hear that there has been a discussion of, is the utility the right entity that should be supplying all this extra power? I would argue that they probably aren't, because you can do an awful lot with private financing spread over very long periods of time. There are huge amounts of funding that's available for the one that I'm fascinated by is Scandinavian retirement funds that have these huge amounts of money at these very low interest rates that are equivalent of a 30 or 50-year kind of bond that could be issued without having to go to the voters. So then pushing that power farther and farther and farther back into the community means, of course, more and more robust generation that isn't used all the time. So that's a sort of a lost or an underfunded asset or an underutilized asset. But to me, it's essential that it's really essential that you have that capacity, and I'm enough of a sort of a I don't know, maybe what would the right term be, sort of a skeptic, I suppose, to say that I think that there should be a highly competitive energy supplying capacity. That right now you can, there are all these competing companies to give you the various ways that you get energy to move yourself around. And I think the same thing would be ultimately a valuable landscape for us to move to in energy as well. Because if you're just pushing everything on the utilities, you're just pushing everything right back into a non-competitive, well, let's just ask the ratepayers for more money. And let's ask, the reason I was going to say, Gary, is that the city of Fairfield, I don't know, you may remember when he did his presentation to us, right? At that time he was saying 60 million, now it's 80 million. He has to spend $80 million for a 500 vehicle fleet at his corporation yard before he buys one charger or one vehicle. $80 million just to take the facility and turn it into something where he can actually have that many vehicles. And by the way, the power is is he's not talking about the power, he's talking about architectural work at the facility, which the ratepayer's never going to pay for. That's going to be the local taxpayer.
Well, let me expand that argument. In a good year, cap and trade was bringing in $2 billion. I don't know what it did in the last year, but it's been hovering above and below $1 billion each year. But here's the controversial part of it. By statute, 25% of what's ever collected in that fund goes to high-speed rail. Can we please kill high-speed rail and put that money into the kind of things that we're talking about here, which may actually bring some benefits?
Make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? Yeah. Since it's pretty much killed itself, except for a giant sucking of, yeah.
They've made some really nice signs on the freeway.
Well, I know, and if you're really...
I worked at high-speed rail, okay. It is, anyone that's been to Europe or Asia knows high-speed rail is viable, right? We cannot...
But that's not our structure. We're a car and highway-based society.
All right, now we're getting into like the larger philosophical questions, but high-speed rail is viable. It should be there. Should it be part of the 25% of cap and trade? I don't know. That's the legislature's decision. They are going to have to come up with a spending plan fairly soon because 2030 is coming up, and there is the mandate at that point where they could change the kind of allowances that go into high-speed rail and all the other things in the cap and trade and the greenhouse gas reduction funds. We have to think through the energization in multiple ways. Microgrids, 100%. We need to add those to the menu. Battery backups, yes. Solar, what are we going to do? Offshore wind is going to add a little bit more to it. What are we going to think for hydrogen in the next couple of years with arches? Is it going to be green? Is it still going to be trucked in, transported in? Where is that going to be part of the menu of energy? I think all need to acknowledge, and the legislature and the CPUC first, is that we are not going to get to where we need to be doing business as usual. And we have to innovate. And that's where I'm excited about what we can do at the Mobility Center. But we also have to think through those bridges that get us to where we are going with as little problems. And these are mobile power units that we're seeing. So companies like Caterpillar and Moxion are bringing them in for especially the off-road equipment on the farms and dairies and ag and construction sites. We are seeing opportunities with on-site electrolysis for hydrogen in the like methane areas, landfills, or big ag producers in the Central Valley. So we'll see how much technology adapts there. We're going to see even, I think, in Bakersfield, a company like Watt EV that does charging as a service. PG&E, I think, shorted them on how much power they could bring to a site. So I think they get 2/3 of their power from the utility, and then 1/3 of their power is a closed loop, microgrid where they have solar generation and battery backup to kind of use there. So we are kind of seeing almost like everyone do social experiments, and we're seeing it play out. And in the next couple of years, we're probably going to get best practices reports from everyone to be like, what works? And this is also including people just going gangbusters and buying their own substation and switchgear and all of those other things and creating plans to transfer those back to the utilities or not. And maybe they say it's privatization time and we are going to privatize transportation electrification going forward. So, we are seeing people take kind of hundreds of $1 million and put it into practice to figure out if this is the best practice as we move forward. In a year, we'll probably think through, what's next. They just passed and the governor signed Senate Bill 410 that codifies, I think, 160 days for a utility to provide power to a site. Is that going to be the end of it? No, but that is the foundation for, I think, a lot of legislation going to move forward.
How about other people? I have questions here. Want to join in?
I just want to say it's such a breath of fresh air, and the way you articulated what's happening in the ecosystem with CMC is like, it's awesome. And so I haven't even started yet, and I'm just like, I'm excited.
Well, that's good. Tyler has $500 million for me, I think.
And, well, it's that ecosystem approach,
Yeah.
and it's not just transportation, it's mobility, it's Zoox, right?
Mhm.
It's Amazon. It's Cruise in the sense of the origin,
Yep.
and AVs, and how that fabric can be woven into SAC-RT, and how we can encourage zero emission mobility across not only Sacramento but through other counties with SACOG. And I have one thing to say before I do. I want to address high-speed rail, and partly because Meg Cedoroff, who's the director of sustainability, is incredible. She gave an awesome presentation at Stanford University about a month or two ago at the Precourt Energy. It's every Monday. It's an open invitation for anyone to stream in or go to Stanford. But she's talking about how high-speed rail is a microgrid. It's a 70-megawatt microgrid that's going to tie in with different nodes, Northern California, Southern California, and really have this like very flexible time of use ability to power itself, but also partner with SMUD or partner with PG or partner with SoCal Edison. So fascinating talk. I can send it out, and if you want to forward it on. My jaw dropped. I was like, wow, this is, because I was like you. I was like, gosh, the litigation here is taking 20 years to even not even connect Madera, but that's happening. So the San Joaquin Rock. But the thing I want to mention is about a month ago, I was at the Port of Oakland. And they had a ride and drive.
Yep.
And I was able to drive a Mack truck in the Port of Oakland. That is a beautiful garbage truck. Kenworth was there. Nicola was there with the tray. And it was a very unique opportunity to not only have terawatt infrastructure and form mobility there, but also talk to drivers.
Yeah.
And the way you get drivers in a port is have food truck. So all these drivers are going by, and they're like, oh, free food, right? You get a ticket, you get a voucher. They had some other swag. And so I was there. It was my day off, so I had the full day to kind of just hang out at the port. And I'm talking to drivers, and what's really interesting, most drivers are 1099, right? So they're their own business. And come this next year,
the Port of Oakland, if you have a 2010 truck
Mhm.
or later, you cannot bring that into the port. And so I was talking to multiple people, one who he's had his rig for 10, 20 years, and he's like, well, shoot, I mean, it's time to upgrade. I'm all about this. Another gentleman who purchased his truck 4 years ago, and he's like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And so thinking about drayage, it's interesting when we talk about funding, when we talk about this broader ecosystem, and people want to make money and have great jobs. But then also one thing I left being like, well, gosh, that person who just purchased a truck for 4 years, maybe we can have like a clean cars for all
Yeah.
type of truck giveaway where it's like, hey, trade that in and you can get some funding towards a new one, because that's the big bottleneck that I see. Not only charging, but it's like, how do we actually put drivers in seats
Mhm.
and have them do a great job?
Mhm.
So it's just something I'm exactly. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
how long have you owned your truck versus and how long do you want to stay in that business?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the state has done the carrot and the stick for the transition to transportation decarbonization. So the carrot has been the HVIP program. The acronym is, hybrid and zero emission bus and truck voucher incentive program. Hybrid kind of out now, but it's been a 10-year program. So when it started, that was there. It has $600 million still available for trucks, school buses, transit buses to transition. It does have some regulations and safeguards around it so that, the big fleets like Amazon, Pepsi, Frito-Lay, others can't just take all of that money. I think there's a 30 truck limit right now. It's interesting because the two things. There's been a gigantic rush to buy the latest diesel trucks right now. It's because they're all racing to get in front of that January 1st drayage mandate where you can't have an older truck. So if you look at, the truck business, everyone's been buying the latest diesel or like a recently purchased and a secondhand one. The now money that is going to go in starting I think next year is really focused on independent owner operators and equity, so small fleets. So the Advanced Clean Fleet is the mandate that applies to fleets, not really, it's just like drayage has its own rule, but fleets that are 50 trucks and above. So below 50 trucks on the drayage side is really where those independent owner operators live and kind of reside in for the transition, and how do we make sure that they are getting transitioned in a way that doesn't like economically hurt them. And so the state has under HVIP a program called ISEF, Innovative Small E-Fleet, and that's designed to do the things like truck as a service. So how can you lease an electric truck from a company like Zeem or Forum where your lease terms are the same as a diesel? You don't have to worry about infrastructure, so you don't have to worry about the heavy duty charging that's necessary because you'll be behind the gate or you have a place to, domicile your truck in the nighttime or when you're not using it. And so we're trying to think, I think, as a state of what are these creative ways to solve the independent owner operator, the small truck fleets that have maybe less than 25 and not put them out of business. But also, how do we incentivize the large fleets, the ones that can afford to take this next step? Pepsi, Frito-Lay, Tim, how many do they have like in Sacramento? 25? 20.
22, I think, in Sacramento and 2 down in Modesto.
Yeah, so the 2 Frito-Lay, the 20 Pepsi. How do we get more fleets to invest in a Tesla Semi or a Volvo EVNR so that that secondary market starts to become viable then for those independent owner operators, those small fleets? And what we're seeing is that the batteries on not the first generation, because those batteries like probably weren't that great. We're starting to see that data. The second generation, third generation EVs that are medium heavy duty, the batteries are holding up for 15, 20 years. And then there's usages after that for reuse and repurpose, kind of on the utility scale or the commercial scale. How do we incentivize then that secondary market to develop? It's been a really good job, I think, with the federal government doing the $40,000 tax credit for commercial vehicles that are zero emission. There is a push for reducing that cost by maybe reducing and eliminating the federal excise tax for medium heavy duty. And now there is the tax credits for commercial EV charging infrastructure and hydrogen infrastructure. So I think that the word is out. It's too expensive. But now we're starting to see either government regulation and government funding come in to try to drop that number down where there is parity.
Peter, did you have another question?
No, I kind of had a comment for Tim. I don't want to be well, I won't be a Debbie Downer, I'm going to be a Daniel Downer. But on microgrids, they're great, but fueling the generation with hydrogen is not a smart thing to do. Because if you do that, you're going to have to build 3 times that generation someplace else just to get the hydrogen to then fuel it into the microgrid. You might as well just.
You're talking about electrolysis as a strategy for making the hydrogen? Because there are
Well, if you want to make green hydrogen, that's about the only way you're going to do it, right?
no.
How are you
There are two. There are within 100 miles of Sacramento. There are Butte County, Oroville. You got the name tag for it. Dynamis in Amador County. Comstock's Fuels in Nevada, Carson City, Virginia City. Sierra Energy, there's a subsidiary of Sierra Energy in Reno. Well, the one in Reno is using municipal solid waste. The other 3 that I mentioned are using forest biomass to make negative 100 carbon intensity hydrogen.
Yeah, why don't you just make methane out of it and burn it? You'd be more efficient.
And you have NOx. You don't want NOx, do you? Do you want to get rid of NOx? You want to get rid of the carbon?
Yeah,
So
you can
methane is CH4, so you have carbon in it. You have hydrogen is H2 or better. You don't have any carbon in it, so you're not making any carbon dioxide. You have negative carbon intensity.
But if you take, say, the methane that comes from farms and dairies, that's negative carbon intensity.
Yes.
Because it's CH4 when you burn it and you release carbon, sure, but if you release the methane, it would have been 86 times worse.
Well, that's part of the reason why forest biomass is also negative, right? Because you're taking a source that's just like dairy. It's just like landfill gas, as a matter of fact. But you still have NOx emissions if you're doing. In many cases, you still have NOx emissions if you're doing combustion. Although, as I mentioned, that Cummins engine, which is certified at a level, which can be certified, it's not certified yet, at a steady state, at a number that is so low that it would be certified as zero NOx as a combustion engine. All the turbines are they're certified under different standards, and they all have NOx emissions.
I also have
So-
to point out your hat, Nestle, which is a sustainable aviation fuel company.
They're sustainable, all kinds of things. I got this hat because they were the first company to introduce renewable diesel into the state of California, which is now, I'm going to say, ubiquitous. That's not
Take
cool.
over one of the Richmond refineries too.
They're partnered with the one in Rodeo that is Phillips 66.
Phillips 66. They got a
By the
big
way-
tank out there that advertises
So
that you can
since
see
we've
from
been
the
talking
highway.
about kind of sustainable fuels, and I know this is a heavy duty EV kind of charging sort of meetup, there's a lot of sustainable fuel companies doing research and development in this region right here, and the low carbon fuel standard, those credits. We had a discussion with someone from UC Davis who looked at what was the impact of them, and most of the reduction in emissions came from switching to sustainable fuels, not from electrification. So I guess my kind of question maybe to you on this is, the CMC has focused a lot on electrification, and personally I think that's like the ideal future on it. But has there been a hey, we could be the sustainable fuels hub?
Yeah, I think.
Completely off topic from
No.
where we were
It is.
before,
It is something,
but,
right?
I mean,
It's
I
something
think
to
it's a very
consider,
good point.
and
Those
working
are-
with partners like Tim and Clean Cities, we know that just battery electric is not going to be the thing that solves everything. Like the infrastructure isn't there, the batteries are like still being developed. There has to be space for a menu of options that gets us to a decarbonization goal. And some of that is going to be repowers, some of that is going to be hydrogen, some of that is going to be probably technology that we're still talking about like a year from now. But to just say that electrification of everything unless we're saying electrification through hydrogen or battery electric is there, I think is the way forward. So it's zero emission is what I like to continue to say.
I was reading somewhere where, yeah, I think that we need to look for natural hydrogen.
Yeah.
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 So that is another way that they're going now. I think they found one.
Yeah, that's right. You're talking about
Large deposit, but
yeah.
it's large enough to be commercial in nowhere. But now I think now that we found that, they are now beginning to because they're actually looking at old wells.
Yeah.
That have high hydrogen. So that's what they're so then beginning to go back to old wells that they have tapped to see if they're finding natural hydrogen.
There's a technology that's been a biological technology that's been developed that you can use played out oil wells that you can drop biological organisms into, algae basically, that will eat the oil that's in there, that's still in there, that's not worth pulling out by pumping out, and they exude hydrogen. So it's not just a natural. I know there was a natural they're discovering natural resources underground of hydrogen, but you can make hydrogen from played out oil wells. That would be another renewable hydrogen source. I wanted to say one other thing. This is just kind of for fun. Phillips 66, the refinery you were talking about. If you look at the renewable, the carbon intensity, I look at them almost every week. The carbon intensity, see what's new, what fuels have been certified. A while back, I saw that Phillips 66 had certified 3 carbon intensity pathways for renewable gasoline. So I immediately went to a number of our public agency partners who are all using renewable diesel right now and said, if you could get renewable gasoline, would you use it? Every one of them said, of course. I would put it in every vehicle I currently own that's a gasoline-powered vehicle. I would use nothing else, which is exactly what they're doing now with diesel. I then went to the public information. I don't know anybody at Phillips 66. I went to the public information office and worked my way up a chain of command until I finally got to 2 vice presidents. And I told them, if you guys would just market your renewable gasoline as a neat fuel, I have end users that would use it.
Can you define that? Is it ethanol-based corn? Or?
No, it has nothing to do with ethanol. It's actually part of the process of making renewable diesel. You just get some gasoline that comes along with it. You also get propane that comes along with it. So you get renewable gasoline, renewable propane.
What's the feedstock?
It can be pretty much any feedstock, but a lot of it's tallow and fats, oils, and grease. And then in the Midwest they're doing it with bio. What's that?
McDonald's at gasoline.
Yeah, but when I finally got to the 2 vice presidents, they said basically because of the mandates for electric light duty vehicles at that time, there's no market for renewable gasoline. So all they do is dump it into their regular gasoline. They get a little tiny carbon credit in their regular gasoline. They won't market it as a neat fuel. Same thing with renewable propane, although there is a little bit of a market now for renewable propane. So it is showing up, but they've always, whenever they make renewable diesel, they get a little bit of renewable propane.
Propel fuels. Chevy had an E85, ethanol.
But I'm not talking about ethanol. I'm talking about a renewable fuel that's it's gasoline. You'd put it in your car. Anyway, sorry. I just thought it was kind of fun.
Yeah, I just want to talk about over-the-road trucking and how we can make it sustainable. You talked about, you talked about both electrification and using hydrogen. There's some economic challenges to both of them. One, for electrification, the batteries we've talked about. You can get 500 miles.
Yeah.
It takes 3 hours to
Recharge.
to charge them. The challenge is the infrastructure's not there. That's one of the challenges. The other challenge that we didn't mention is weight, right? Because you can only ship 80,000 pounds interstate, and you're going to lose load, and it's going to make it less economically viable to transport that. So that's something that's going to need to be addressed. Then hydrogen on the counter side it's going to take a lot of volume, and you're going to lose load for that as well.
Yeah.
How do we solve both of those challenges to make it more viable for over-the-road trucking. Also knowing that over-the-road trucking has incredibly small margins. I know this because we own one.
Mm-hmm.
And by small margins, I mean the absolute value of the profit is small. I say absolute value facetiously. Thank you. Someone got the joke. And then also, we talked about owner-operators, and owner-operators in California are persona non grata now with AB5.
Yeah.
So how do we handle trying to get them more excited about doing this? The turnover for trucking drivers in the entire United States is about 100% a year. So there's a lot of challenges that we have.
Mm-hmm.
The environmental challenges that we can solve are great, but we also have to think about what can the business owners expect to have this be improved, and then what can we do to help the truck drivers as well. There's a lot of constituents. So
Yeah.
I don't know what my question was.
No. I think you're hitting a lot like of things that need to be said. The profit margins are minuscule if there are any at all, right? You've talked about the turnover. I think what we're talking about just in general as society is how can we put as much money out there to incentivize early adoption, hoping that then the market can take that and reduce the cost of these vehicles to make sure that they are essentially on par with diesel and provide infrastructure. And we're trying to do that all in like an accelerated way at the weight limit. So, when we think about the battery electric part of the truck, it's probably adding 2,000. So you're taking 2,000 out of your load.
No, that's not true. A diesel tractor, a diesel Class 8 weighs 17,000 pounds. A Tesla tractor weighs 29,000
Okay,
pounds.
so we're adding.
You're giving up.
Tesla semi's 20,000, Nikola Tre is 30,000, and in terms of that total vehicle gross weight of 82,000, there's a 2,000 adder for EVs, but lightweighting is definitely something that needs to happen because
100%.
anything minus that truck, that's your load.
Yep.
We've already been lightweighting like crazy for years. Aluminum wheels, all kinds of aerodynamic fairings, aluminum trailers.
Yeah.
Trailers with cloth sides instead of.
But fundamentally, Nikola is so. When I was at that Port of Oakland event, I talked to one of the
hydrogen Zeppelin trucks.
the folks there, and I got to drive the.
Just gotta
vehicle.
make the
When
name
I was
different.
Talking to him, I said, how much is this, and where can I buy? He's like, yeah, we have a couple in inventory. I'm like, inventory? What do you mean? You're only making 250 a year, and there was someone from Tesla there, and he was commenting how the Nikola was actually like super responsive, just a great truck to drive. And I sort of was like, well, I wonder why they have inventory. He's like, well, it's 30,000 pounds, right? So that's something that needs to be factored in, and yeah,
You give up a lot of tear weight when you put a battery on it.
Yeah, and that's why Nikola's hydrogen is actually selling more so right now than the battery electric.
Well, they're done with battery electric. Like Nikola has essentially said, we are
Hydrogen.
stopping this, and we are going to be a hydrogen truck manufacturer moving forward. I think that they don't even sell it anymore on their Tre 8 BEV, partly because of like the battery problems that they had. I think with their batteries in this previous part of the year, but they did a full-on transition at their plant outside of Phoenix to just be like, we are transitioning straight to hydrogen. We think that's the market for us, moving forward. Probably some of this for like load capacity, some of it just for being able to have.
And they have a grant to do a station in the Metro Air Park area, a grant from the Sacramento Air District. In theory, a hydrogen station.
We're getting towards the end of the
But if it's hydrogen only, then it's got to be a use case. It's got to be traded. It's got to be short term here to there and back. It can't be over the road where you're going from Boise, Idaho to Redding, California and back, because there's not going to be the hydrogen charging stations.
There's none. And that's why I think the hydrogen hub announcements were important, because it does show that there can be viability essentially from the Port of Houston to the Port of LA to SeaTac, and then creating kind of those mid gaps. What Nikola is doing right now is they have their Hyla company that is doing on the road transportation of mobile hydrogen to kind of fill those gaps right now. And I think what's nice is you could kind of just do the math and be like, where do I need to put one hydrogen station every 300-ish miles from the Port of LA and Long Beach? this way it kind of works out in their favor. They could, I think they're already developing one in Riverside County, and then the next one would basically be Nikola headquarters for manufacturing moving eastward. Northern ways, like I think they have identified what they can do in the Central Valley, and for this like short period and interim, they're probably going to be doing trucked in hydrogen, and then mobile hydrogen to kind of fill that gap.
So we do have a, we want to also make sure we get everyone all the time. But I had a question on, so we're talking about a lot of different technologies to fuel heavy duty trucks, and all of them have different mechanisms, different storage, and different things like that. What are you kind of seeing, maybe potentially from fleets or cities when they're having to do an $80 million investment in just retrofits? What are they really considering? Are they deciding right now I'm going all in on one technology? Are they looking at ways to have wiggle room later down the line?
Well, what I can tell you, transit is kind of an interesting one because the Sacramento Regional Transit District has been dithering for quite a while. It's probably not something I should have said in being recorded. They've been going through a process, and they've committed to their first major purchase of zero emission vehicles will be in 2027 for transit, full-size 40-foot transit buses. They've got quite a few sort of smaller electric vehicles right now. And they were 100% committed to going 100% battery electric. And then, of course, they looked at how that actually plays out. When you start doing charging at scale, it's incredibly expensive. And then you have all kinds of route issues, you have labor issues, you have a lot of issues. So they're now saying that, Paul Loud testified at the Air District on September the 28th when they had a hydrogen sort of panel, and he's the CEO of SMUD. He came down and said, number one, they're going to put an Air Products hydrogen dispensing system at the SMUD site, which is going to probably be light duty, not heavy duty. But he also said they now know that they have to do hydrogen and battery. They have to do hydrogen, probably some battery electric, but they have to do hydrogen. You don't know quite what the mix will be, because if you go battery electric and you try to do that with your entire fleet at SAC RT, it's 2 buses for every one right now. You have to put 2 buses in place and the extra labor and the extra buses, because they can't do what you need to do on a Sacramento transit route. So they know they have to do some hydrogen. And so it's fast. Now Pape Kenworth in Sacramento they are saying all the truck fleets up and down the valley, this is private fleets, are saying, how do we get, when Kenworth are you going to get your Class 8 tractors out there? We want hydrogen tractors, because they can't operate using battery electric vehicles. They can't do what they need to do on a 250-mile range, essentially. I mean, claiming 500 is, I know people say that, but Pepsi's doing they've got their 20 trucks in Sacramento, and all they're doing is doing basically sub-regional work. They're not driving over 150 miles, maybe 200 miles a day. So they're not hauling, they're not going to.
They just have run on less though. We're full open data platform, which is awesome. If you haven't checked it out, I think the highest is like almost 700 in one day, two charges.
And
great analytics.
the Modesto Frito-Lay ones, they are doing routes that go all through the Bay Area or as far from Modesto going into like Butte County.
But what are they hauling?
All their stuff, right?
Potato chips.
Yeah, they're full.
Pepsi in Sacramento is hauling beverages. And then as soon as you start putting a load in a truck, you end up, Ford Lightning has a theoretically with an extended range package, has a 305-mile range, I think. Nobody who owns one has ever put more than 280 miles worth of range in it. You put a trailer in the back of it, you're at 100 miles. I mean, as soon as you put, as soon as you put load, it's range, load, speed. That's what you have to evaluate. And it used to be range, load, speed, pick one. Well, now as the batteries are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you don't have to just pick one, but it's all a function of how much energy can you put in a given volume and at a given weight, and the bigger the battery, the less load you're carrying.
There's a magic wizard called regen braking. I went
Yeah.
to Tahoe 2 weeks ago. I saw 4 Tesla semis. 2 of them were just the truck. One had a trailer of steel I-beams. Coming down just capturing all that regen braking. That's something that an internal combustion engine cannot do.
Yeah, but if you're running up down the valley, you're getting no regen or not much regen.
I mean, I want to be I'm an optimist.
I'm the optimist too. I'm a
but
glass
you,
is
but you
all
need,
full.
if you're a fleet operator, you need to be a
But
realist.
here is something that we don't really talk about. You know, the money that's coming in from NEVI or the money that's coming in from charging as a service. We hopefully will go the opposite way on batteries. I want the manufacturers to do smaller batteries that have faster like recharge times and make that the way to move forward. And it reduces the load, like weight, it reduces the costs, and it allows the technology to advance. So I think, you know, we're starting to have larger conversations about when you have not so much range anxiety anymore, but charger anxiety. How can we solve that so that does provide you with? We see a lot of truck drivers that are like, yeah, you know, it'd be great after 3 hours of driving, yeah, I could take a 30-minute break and charge back up anyways. So if we could continually top off, or if they're coming to a grocery station or like, you know, the neighborhood Safeway and dropping off kind of their load, why can't they, you know, be topping off every place that they're going? And I think that's what utilities are looking for too, as to how to mitigate the need to have like fleet charging by distributing that over routes. And I think that's why they want the data from independent owner operators or fleets to say, where are you going? Where can we give you small bursts of energy rather than go to your kind of depot and have to charge 100 at one time?
So I want to highlight, Gary, we took a Tesla and we took the CleanStart outreach trailer up to Siskiyou, or we tried to, because we took it in a Tesla Model X, and we had to drop off the trailer because we weren't sure if the Model X could get it with its range. And I want to highlight, you said it was capacity of the battery, weight, speed. And I think we could have got there if Gary didn't drive like a 16-year-old.
We were late.
But with that, I do want to give you guys a chance to tell me, each of you, give me something that you're optimistic that we about in the near future with the energy transition, charging, and Sacramento.
Okay, so we're doing transportation hubs, which are these small, community-based transportation hubs. We have a grant right now to do 6, and we're a finalist to do 6 in West Sacramento. I think that microgrids that make that site sustainable, that have some level of robust on-site generation, not trying to think about PV as a robust generation strategy, are going to be, and we're going to pilot them in at least a couple of those sites, and I think microgrids are going to be a very significant component of how this, but the depot thing might be a macro grid when you're talking about that, where you have really a lot more power. We will be piloting micro. I think that the group that we talked to today, Next Era, I think we'll be talking about a macro grid, and I think that's to me, that's the solution, rather than trying to figure out how the grid can maybe make this all work.
You know, I'm excited about where we'll all be, not 5 years from now, 2 years from now. We have seen jumps in technology. We are seeing people work on things like mobile power sources. And, you know, to your guys' point of driving somewhere remote, we are going to have AAA or your insurance and auto service company pulling up in a trailer that has enough juice for 8 to 10 charges on a DC fast charger to give you that bump up to get you to your next destination. The state has announced that their NEVI funding is going out, so that's going to help on the light duty. For medium heavy duty, all of these players, for the most part, are backed with gigantic capex. And they are companies that are bringing best practices from the solar industry. They're companies that are bringing best practices from real estate. And I think we are at that point now where all of the utilities, and PG&E will probably admit it's the most behind on energization, interconnection, are doing everything in their power to figure out how to scale your fleets or domiciles or major charging stations. So they are telling you, we might not be able to give you like the 5 megawatt now, but we could give you 2, and then we could grow into 3, and then 4 and 5 into a certain time period. So 2 years from now, I hope that this conversation is very different given the advancements in technology, and I hope that a lot of those advancements happen at the California Mobility Center.
Well, we'll check you on that. But so this has been a great conversation, and what it says to me is boundless opportunity for companies to come up with new solutions, whether it's doing better on the microgrids or some of the bigger problems, and what other generation sources might people come up with for the macrogrids. Plus, there's a whole family of software related innovations.
We didn't even talk about like advanced load management. We didn't talk about battery replacements and like stack ups. Barely, but like and I think the regulatory agencies are thinking about load management software and how they could integrate it at the Energy Commission level too.
Well, if you just sponsor a series of brainstorming sessions on this, the center that you lead will be a success, because I mean, there's mental popcorn going all over the place, but nobody's gathering up the kernels and saying, well, what does all this mean? And how do we do it? And what's a project that goes forward?
Yeah.
And that's what we hope comes out of a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. We need to agree on some things that need to get done, not necessarily the big swing for the fences, bases loaded home run. Singles are good too.
Yeah. The on-base percentage needs to be high.
And it's, I've told people, we worked with companies for a while, my consistent word is nothing succeeds like success. If you get something done, even if it's small, it grows and you have a track record, and then you start getting more money.
Well, everyone, keep an eye on your calendars. I think we're in discussions to host kind of a working group with state partners in December to talk about solutions to energization and interconnection. And it is my hope that we could then host a happy hour at the Ramp Up Factory after, where you guys can make these connections and talk about possible solutions.
Can we get electric go-karts and put up a course and all that sort of stuff?
That'd be great. You know, we're trying to do more ride and drives there, and you know, working with their resource board.
All right, well, I'd like to thank Tim Taylor and Orville Thomas from Sacramento Clean Cities and the California Mobility Center. CMC and Clean Cities both donating your time to come and talk with us. Our sponsors again, Bloom, which I thought I saw him here, but no, that's Josh again.
Just want to make sure we weren't destroying the place.
And our additional sponsors, Reverend, who is doing the videos here, Moss Adams, Greenberg Traurig, and Weintraub Tobin, along with our all of our supporters. Thank you for attending. If you guys want to connect with me, most of you know how, and I look forward to doing it in the future. You're now free to come and finish the drinks we have, and as we clean up. Yes.
Drinks over